Hello, my name is Amy Johnson from the Cmas Help Desk. Today I'm going to provide an overview of enhancements made to the provider portal that will be available on July 1st. This training will cover new functionality for facility administrators, the ability to track service capacity, and the process of entering the new family-centered services in the provider portal. I'll reference the provider portal guidance document throughout this training, so it will be helpful for workers to have that available while viewing the training. The first thing you'll notice when logging in is that there are some new tabs displayed in the provider portal. The first two tabs I'm going to cover will only be available for users that have the designated role of provider administrator. Therefore, not all workers will have these tabs visible to them when they log into the system. The User Administration tab is where administrators will be able to maintain a list of active staff members from their agency. Only active members from your agency will display on the user list. To select a worker, you can scroll down the list and click Select, or use the search feature. And then click Search. And I'm going to go ahead and select Provider Worker, which is just a stock worker I created for demonstration purposes. The account details on the account profile will be grayed out, so you won't be able to modify any of the general information or the sites. But what you can do is deactivate and activate that user by unchecking the active box and clicking Save. That action will deactivate the user. So then the user will no longer be available on the user list. To reactivate the worker, I'm going to search for that same worker again and select them. And then just check the active box again and click Save. Once activated, the worker will display in the user list. The next tab I'm going to walk through is the Site Administration tab. This is another tab that will only be visible for users that have the designated role of provider administrator. Facility workers will not have access to this tab. The Site Administration tab is where the total numbers of available slots can be adjusted up and down for solution-based casework and safe care to reflect staff capacity for each DCAT cluster. This facility list will display all active sites for your agency. Locate the specific family-centered site from the facility list. And you'll note that some agencies may have more than one family-centered service site if they're providing services in multiple service areas. To use the search feature, type the service area acronym in the search bar and click Search. So I'm going to type CRSA for Cedar Rapids Service Area and click Search. Then select the site from the search results. The general information and service sections, again, are read-only. The user has the ability to modify the service totals. To do that, click Edit next to a DCAT cluster name and type over the total numbers. And then click Save. On July 1st, administrators will need to get into the system and add totals for each DCAT cluster. I'll show you where those totals are reflected on the next tab, which is Service Capacity. This is where the availability of family-centered services is tracked on a statewide map. All users have access to this tab. Click on any county to view an availability matrix for the DCAT cluster. I'm going to go ahead and click on Lynn. And the pop-up window will display family-centered service capacity and availability. Providers will only be able to view service capacity information for their own agency. Capacity totals. So the service capacity totals come from entries made by administrators on the Site Administration tab. So that's where you'll see the 30 and 10 that I just entered previously. Filled totals. As providers open and close services in the provider portal, the filled column will display the current number of cases the agency is serving with each service. It's important to note that solution-based casework, QRTP post-discharge service cases count in the solution-based casework filled totals. Available shows how many cases the provider still has the capacity to serve. Essentially, it's the capacity total minus filled. A count of open family preservation cases and non-agency voluntary service cases will display in the grid. There is no capacity or availability display for these two types of service. I'm going to add services to a client here shortly, and we'll then show you how the service capacity map and matrix updates accordingly. The next step is to locate the client to enter the placement or service on the search tab. You have the option to search by name, fax ID, or state ID. I'm going to do a name search, so I will search for Pebbles Flintstone. And click search. If you enter a date of birth or financial county, that will filter the results further. Click select next to the client to make it your active client on the placement service tab, and you'll see that information display on the header. This tab is where you will add or view placements and services for the client. Any services or placements that were closed prior to July 1st are going to be read-only for the details. I'm going to add each of the new family-centered service types to show you the dynamic fields specific to each service type. The first service I'm going to add is solution-based casework. I'm going to click on the Add New Entry button on the header. The Add Placement Service pop-up window will appear for entry. What you'll see is a set of fields that will need to be completed across the board for all service types. The service type selected determines which additional fields display for entry, and I'll highlight those dynamic fields as I add each service type. Provider agency. So only your agency will be available in the drop-down menu. And for demonstration purposes, I'm going to use 4 Oaks. Site. The old SPS and FSRP sites will no longer display in the drop-down menu. Instead, the new family-centered site will display. The format for these sites is the service area acronym and a dash and then FCS, which stands for Family-Centered Services. So that's the one I'm going to select. Service type. At this site, you'll see all of the new services that will be available July 1st. I'm going to select solution-based casework as my first service to add to this case. DCAT cluster. So this is a new field. Select from the list of available DCAT clusters in that service area. I'll select Lynn. Financial county is going to be all the financial counties in that service area. And again, I'm going to select Lynn. Referral source, you're going to make the appropriate selection of DHS, JCS, law enforcement, or voluntary. So I'm going to select DHS. DHS/JCS worker is where you're going to select the worker making the referral. The list is alphabetized by last name, and you can just begin typing and the last name of the worker, and then the screen will jump down to the name on the list. So I'm going to select social worker. And again, that's just a stock worker that I've created for demonstration purposes. If the case transfers to a different DHS or JCS worker, this field will automatically update with the name of the assigned worker from our fax system. The worker listed in the drop-down menu will receive alerts for critical incidents and documents uploaded. I will discuss this in more detail a bit later in the training. Assigned provider worker. So the list of active workers for your agency on the user administration tab will appear in the drop-down. If a worker does not appear in the drop-down menu, then they may need to be activated on the user administration tab. So for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to select provider worker. So I'm going to type worker and it's going to jump down to that selection. Provider worker start date. So that's the date the worker started the service. So I'm going to use dates in June just for demonstration purposes, but these new services and fields will not be available until July 1st. So keep that in mind. If the case transfers to a different provider worker than the assigned provider worker, the start date and name need to be updated accordingly. That way, the history of provider assignment can be tracked behind the scenes. Referral date, I'll choose June 2nd. Service start date is going to be June 3rd, the same as the provider worker start date. And then service end date can be left blank until the service is ready to be ended. There's a free form text field to document any additional information regarding the service. The two dynamic fields for this service type are DCAT cluster and financial county. However, you'll see these two same fields on other service types as well. Hit save, and the system will redirect you back to the placement service list grid with the new entry. The next service I'm going to add is a family team decision meeting facilitation. So I'll click add new entry and fill out those fields. I'm going to make a lot of the same selections as I did on the previous service, but this time I'm going to select FTDM meeting facilitation. And we'll give the provider work date is June 8th. Referral date, we'll say the referral was made on June 3rd. Service start date, we use June 8th. Date of meeting is a field specific to this service type. So I'm going to enter June 8th and select whether the referring DHS worker attended the meeting. So I'll mark yes. Service end date, I'll go ahead and enter as June 8th. The two dynamic fields to both of these are going to be the date of meeting and did the referring DHS worker attend the meeting. And those fields are applicable to both FTDM meetings as well as YTDM meetings. So I'm going to hit save and the system will be redirected to the placement service list grid. Safe Care is the next service I'm going to add. So I'll click add new entry and fill out the standard fields. And you can see as I select the service type, the screen will change to add those additional fields dynamic to the service. So financial county, I'm going to select Lynn again. And for Safe Care, I will have a start date of the 9th. We'll just use June 9th for referral date and service start date as well. When SafeCare is selected as the service type, you'll see modules that appear at the bottom of the screen so that you can check off all the modules that were completed by the family. Once you check a module, then you'll see sessions displayed, and you can check off all the sessions completed by the family. The fields dynamic to SafeCare are going to be DCAT cluster, financial county, and then the modules. The screen will allow the user to fill out the modules at a later date, so you can leave these fields blank when you're initially adding the service. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to navigate back to the service capacity map to review how the service entry has updated on the availability matrix. So if I go to service capacity and click on Lynn, Now you'll see that solution-based casework has one filled, and so does Safe Care. If I click on that, then you'll see information for the client that is active with those types of services. So all you have to do is click on the totals to view client information. The next service I'm going to enter is family preservation. However, family preservation services cannot overlap with Safe Care. So if I attempt to add that service while family preservation is still open, the system will fire a validation error. I'm going to demo what that validation error message looks like in just a bit. So I'm going to modify the Safe Care and end date the service so they don't overlap. So I'll use the system end date of the 15th for that service and click Save. Now if I navigate back to the capacity map, you'll notice that the count updated for Safe Care as 0 because we don't have any active clients in that service. Now that Safe Care is ended, I can add family preservation to the placement list grid. So I'm going to select my provider, my site. Service type is family preservation. DCAT cluster, financial county. And I'll select a provider start date of the 16th. Same with the referral date. And referral time is a dynamic field that displays in addition to the referral date for family preservation. I'll just click now. Service start date, we'll use the 16th. Date of child safety conference. So this is where you're going to enter that date of when the child safety conference occurred and then the date of the follow-up child safety conference. So we'll select the 25th. Now, if a child safety conference was not held, you're going to select the reason from the drop-down menu. However, since dates were entered, you can leave that field defaulted to select. The fields dynamic to family preservation are going to be DCAT cluster, financial county, the referral time, and then the child safety conference questions. I'm going to hit save. Family preservation units are 10 calendar days in length. I'm going to modify the service and end date it for the 25th. So the system will allow for a maximum of 3 consecutive units to be used. If units are used consecutively, then it will be a single service entry on the placement service list grid. So if it's determined that family preservation needs to be extended another unit, what you would do is modify the service and remove the end date, and you can also just extend it. Now I'm going to add a qualified residential treatment program placement. So what I'm going to do is select Fort Oaks, and this is, I'm going to select Independence as the site. This is no longer family-centered service, it's a placement. So I'm going to enter the site. The service type, I'm going to select QRTP. And my start date, I'll use the 25th. I'm going to use that for the referral date and start date. And then anticipated discharge date is just an estimate of when you expect the child to discharge. And then there's going to be 3 questions. So the first is, does the child's parent or guardian live more than 50 miles away? We'll say no. Does the child's sibling live more than 50 miles away? we'll say not applicable if the child doesn't have any siblings. And then, is contact restricted by DHS, JCS, or a court order? I'll go ahead and just select yes. The fields dynamic to QRTP are anticipated discharge date and then the last three questions. The set of questions right here will display for any type of placement. So I'm going to hit save. It's important to note that solution-based casework should not overlap with QRTP or shelter placements for more than 30 days. If there is a reason that SBC should extend more than 30 days, for instance, if there are other children in the household that are eligible for family-centered services, then the provider should obtain DHS approval for services to continue. So I'm going to end solution-based casework services now that the child is placed in QRTP. So I'm just going to modify that record and enter a service end date of the 25th and hit save. An alert will be added to the portal in the next few weeks, which notifies the provider and DHS worker when there's been an overlap for 23 calendar days. That way, there can be discussion between the provider and DHS worker if solution-based casework services should be extended beyond 30 days. Now I'm going to end date QRT placement to return the child home. So I'm going to modify that record and enter an end date. We'll use the 28th. When ending the placement, you'll be required to enter the QRTP aftercare service provider. So I'm going to use 4 Oaks again. And hit save. The last service type I'm going to add on this case is solution-based casework, QRTP post-discharge services. So I'll select my DCAT cluster, financial county, and fill out some of these standard fields like referral source, DHS worker is going to be worker, social worker. And I'll use a start date of today's date, the 29th. I'll say the referral date was yesterday. And service start date, we'll use the 29th. And with QRTP post-discharge services, what you're going to select is the QRTP site the youth was discharged from. So I'm going to select 4 Oaks Independent and the discharge date, which would be June 28th. The fields dynamic to solution-based casework QRTP post-discharge services are going to be DCAT cluster, financial county, and then the questions about which QRTP site the youth was discharged from and that discharge date. I'm going to hit save. Solution-based casework, QRTP post-discharge services count towards the number of filled beds for solution-based casework services. So I'm going to navigate to the service capacity map and again, just show you what that looks like. So even though we close solution-based casework services, because we have solution-based casework QRTP post-discharge services open, if I click on that total filled, it's going to display my client. Now I'm going to navigate back to the placement service list, and solution-based casework QRTP post-discharge services should run a minimum of 180 days after the date of discharge from the QRTP. If I modify the placement and enter a service end date less than 180 days, the fields will display, we'll just use today's date. You're going to see fields display for the worker to enter the reason for early discharge. So I'll select place in detention and then the DHS approval date. And I'll go ahead and use today's date. Now I'm going to pull up a different case to add non-agency voluntary services. And I'll just look up my new client. Bam Bam. And select them from the search. Those services cannot overlap with any type of services or placements. So that's why I'm going to add it to a fresh case. So I'll click Add New Entry and select my provider. And it's a family-centered service. So then on service type, I'm going to select non-agency voluntary services. Select a DCAT cluster and financial county. Referral Source, SDHS. And I'll have a provider worker start date, we'll say June 4th. Referral date, we'll say is June 3rd, and service start date is June 4th. Non-agency voluntary services has a field to enter the date of transition meeting between the referring DHS worker, provider, and family. So I'll enter June 6th for that. Did the referring DHS worker attend the meeting? So you'll select yes or no from the dropdown. And then the child's living arrangement at the time of discharge. So I'm going to select parent, relative, or fictive kin. And then hit save. I'll navigate to the service capacity map again just to show you how the numbers are updated here on non-agency voluntary services. So again, if I click the total filled, I'm going to see my client, and that's going to be Bam Bam. Since non-agency voluntary services cannot overlap with any other type of placement or service, I'm going to attempt to add a shelter placement to demonstrate the validation message that displays. So I'm going to go ahead and enter the site as Independence and then select Shelter from the drop-down menu. I'll select a date of June 9th because I know that overlaps with non-agency voluntary service dates. And then I'll enter on the 3 questions that are specific to placements, and I'll just mark those and hit save. When I do that, a validation error will display. And that's because it conflicts with an overlapping existing record on the placement service list. The conflicting placement service may not be visible since each user is only able to see placements and services entered by their own agency. So essentially, this grid could be blank even if the validation error message fires. So the error message will specify the provider, site, and service type of the conflicting placement so that contact can be made regarding reconciling entries. You'll be provided with a list of whom to contact at each agency. The major overlap rules are as follows. Non-agency voluntary services should not overlap any other service or placement type. Placements should not overlap any other placements with the exception of diversion. And family preservation services and safe care should not overlap. Those rules are included in your guidance document. Now I'm going to navigate back to Pebble Flintstone's case to demonstrate how to add life skills assessment, family connection notes, critical incidents, and documents. So I'm going to use the search feature to retrieve Pebbles. And I'm going to select the QRTP placement. On placements, all 4 sections will display for entry. Since these sections already existed in the portal, I'll go through each section fairly quickly. So I'm going to click on Add New Life Skills Assessment and then enter the date the life skill was completed, the assessment, a score, and I'll enter 4 You can enter numbers 1 through 5 and then select the type. So I will select admission assessment and click save. You'll get a green success ribbon. And I'll add a family connection note for the month of June. So click that button on the header. Then I'll select June and 2020. And then you're going to enter the frequency of non-face-to-face contact during the month between the child and the parent or guardian. I'll select 1 through 5 contacts. Then you're going to select the frequency of face-to-face contact during the month between the child and the parent, guardian, or other adult members of their positive support system. So I'll select 1 to 3. And then frequency of face-to-face contact during the month between the child and their siblings. I'll select 0 since there are no siblings for this case. And then just press save and you'll get the green success ribbon. Critical incidents is the next section. Those need to be documented within 24 hours of occurrence. So I'm going to click add new critical incident on the header and I'll enter the date and time of the incident. Say it occurred at 9:06 a.m. And then enter the date and time the incident was reported to the assigned DHS or JCS worker. The date and time created is timestamped based off of when the critical incident was entered into the provider portal. Any of the 4 circumstances listed on the screen require the provider to document a critical incident. I'm going to select police call. Thoroughly document all the details of the incident in the free-form text field at the bottom of the screen, along with the provider agency's response. And then press save. Once saved, an alert will generate to the assigned DHS or JCS worker, notifying them of the incident. Documents. Provider staff can upload a PDF or image to the document section by clicking the Upload Document button on the header. Enter the display name. Please reference the guidance document for standard naming conventions that should be used for each document type. I'm going to enter a service plan for Pebbles. And then select service plan as the document type. There are 2 ways to upload a document, and I'll show both of those to you. The first is to select a document from your location on your computer just by clicking the Drop Files button. And then I'll select from my documents, double click on that, and press Upload Document. Once it's fully uploaded, then it'll display on the document list grid. If it is a DHS case, the DHS worker will receive a notification that the document was uploaded. JCS staff do not receive document upload alerts on their cases. To view the uploaded document, click Select on the document list, and a separate viewer window will open to display the document. And I'm just going to close that viewer. Now I'm going to return to the placement service list to select a service. And I'll select solution-based casework. Services only have the life skills assessments and documents section. On the solution-based case service, I'm going to upload a casework contact note. This is a new type of document that will be available on July 1st. So I'm going to click Upload Document and enter the display name. And select Casework Contact Note. When I select that type of note, there are going to be some dynamic fields that display. So you'll enter the contact date. I'll go ahead and enter June 20th, the location of the contact. So I'll enter parent, guardian's home, and then the duration in minutes. I'll just enter 85 minutes. And then I'll demo how to drag and drop a document from my desktop. So what I'm going to do is just select a document for my desktop and drag it over to that box and then press upload. And that's the second way to upload a document. The Casework contact note is the only type of document that doesn't generate an alert to the DHS worker. 3055 authorizations. So I'm going to pull up Bam Bam as my client again to demonstrate what those look like. Providers can access Conversion 3055 authorization forms that were auto-generated for the conversion of active group care placements to QRTP placements that occurred on April 1st, and then the conversion of active FSRP services to solution-based casework on July 1st. The referral authorization forms grid will display a termination 3055 for the previous service code, and then a new 3055 authorization for the new service code. Click on the printer icon next to the record to access a PDF of the 3055 authorization. I'm not going to click on it for demonstration purposes because the PDF will display confidential information. Cmas Legacy Reports is the last tab. This is where you'll be able to locate entries that were made in the former CWIS system prior to July 1st, 2017. Entries in this tab are read-only. Due to limitations with the test system, I'm unable to display legacy data. However, a screenshot of entries that would typically display here is included in your guidance document. That concludes the presentation on the provider portal for the new family-centered services that will roll out on July 1st. Any system-related questions can be directed to the CWIS Help Desk at cwishelp@dhs.state.ia.us. Thank you.